Oh God, sorry. I was gonna do an intro, but I kind of messed it up. But this is what if Deku was, and I would say this is what if Deku was an Iran card, but it's sort of like what if Deku was a zanpakuto, since that's exactly what Deku's gonna be in this. So Deku, we're gonna skip back to 50,000 years in the past. Deku just died and he just became a hollow. Now, 50,000 years, Deku's been living a real hell of a life. Get it? Because it's kind of hell. But Deku, he's been, this is what Deku's hell is. He isn't able to see, he isn't able to hear, he isn't able to feel, he isn't able to touch, he isn't able to, basically, he just doesn't have any of his senses. He's floating in an endless void. As 50,000 years later, Deku finally wakes up from his nightmare. He wakes up and he looks down to see that a mask on his face has just been ripped off. And he looks around. He sees a world. He's hit with all these emotions. He's hit with happiness, sadness, guilt, basically anger, rage, all of them. He can feel now. He can feel as he starts to look around. Deku is nothing but a spiritual energy at the moment, which means that if he doesn't link himself to someone quickly, then he will die. So, Midoriya, or basically Zangetsu, which is Deku's zanpakuto name, he starts to look around. Look around for something. Something that he can cling on to. Something that he can, yes. Then he says yes, as he finds something. He finds something with a spiritual pressure emanating from it, which there are people who have spiritual pressure in this. So Deku, he would rush towards it, and he would grab the chain on the child's stomach. As Deku, he would basically start forcing himself within it, as the child would start to cry in pain. As now, Deku has been basically properly sealed within the child. Inko taking it and taking the baby to comfort it. So, Deku, he's basically sitting there. As he would be hit with all the, basically, babies don't really have memories, but he would see all the, basically, what the baby has seen throughout its months of being alive. Now, Deku's like, this is what it means to be human, as he feels warmth within this child. Now, this child is known as Kugo. So, Deku is Kugo's zanpakuto. Now, years go by as Deku has been silently watching the little boy's life, which Deku, when he entered Kugo's body, he destroyed his quirk gene. So, Kugo doesn't really have a quirk. So he's been bullied. But then Deku sees how this child, he never really let it get to him. He's always been fighting back, which confuses Deku. Why fight back against people who are stronger than you? Deku always asks himself this. Because Deku, he has eaten thousands of hollows. He's fought in foes that he knew that there was certain death against, but he still fought them. He's eating thousands of billions of hollows. So Deku, he's basically like questioning why this kid, or why this child would fight people that he knows he knows he wouldn't win against. Until one day, Deku gets too curious. He asks it straight up. He says, "Boy, why do you fight battles that you know you can't win?" As Kugo would jump out of his chair, which Kugo's right now, he is in the 8th grade. So I'm gonna say this is around the beginning of middle school. So Kugo, he's like, huh? As he's like, who is that? Who's playing the prank now? As the teacher's like, Kugo, sit down. As he'd be like, I'm sorry. As Kugo would sit back in his chair. As Deku would ask him again. He says, boy. As Kugo's like, there it is again. And he would say, why do you fight people you know you're weaker, you're weaker than? And Kugo's like, well, he starts to basically speak in his mind, thinking that Deku would hear it, which Deku can. He says, well, because I'm not going to let these jerks get to me. And he's like, I'll be one of the strongest heroes, even if I don't have a quirk. And then Deku would basically look through Kugo's memories, and you'd be like, yes, the quirk gene thing. It must be my fault that it was erased. And then Kugo's like, your fault that what was erased? As Deku would say, your quirk gene. So how Deku works in this, he works kind of like Kurama. He basically forced himself within Kugo's body so he can basically cling to the world of the living without being sent hurling back into the hell that he was in. So, yeah. Zanpakutos work a little bit differently in this what if. And basically, Todoroki will have a Zanpakuto of his own. A bunch of other people in the series will too. So, as Kugo's like, you destroyed my quirk gene? As Deku's like, yes, but talk to me after you're done with this school thing, and I'll basically make it up to you. As after school, Kugo would start to talk to Deku within his mind, walking home with his twin, not twin, but yeah, I'll say twin sister, who is Izumi. So Kugo's the little brother of the two, so he's basically talking within his mind, asking. He's like, so, what was that payback that you were talking about? Hold on, my mom called me. So, Deku will begin to speak. Alright, kid, I'll lend you some of my power, but if you want to use it, then you're gonna have to basically pass the test, just so I know that you won't die and then send me back to hell. Kugo's like, what do you mean back to hell? And Deku's like, never mind about that, but still. Your training will begin at night, as he says, go to sleep. As basically Kugo would get home, and he would basically will wait the time where he goes to sleep, hoping that this isn't a prank. He wakes up in Deku's world, which Deku just basically has turned everything to sideways, so yeah. As Deku's like, alright kid, if you want to prove that you're worthy of my power, then he would basically pull out his hand, and he's like, you gotta hit me once. And I heard about this entrance exam thing. You have to hit me once before this entrance exam, and I'll let you get my power. And Kugo's like, alright. As he would basically think this is easy, he would throw a punch at Deku, which Deku would just immediately dodge. He's fast. He has the speed of a Rancor, which is the strongest form of a basically hollow. So over the course of the year, Kugo's just basically been trying to hit Deku. And now, the 10 months of training isn't really different. He just goes to sleep, and he's basically practicing on how to hit, just trying to hit Deku. He's also training his physical body, because Deku tells him that if his body isn't ready for it, then, yeah, you're not getting it. So, yeah. Now, it's the end of the 10 months of training arc. Now, Kugo, he finally managed to hit Deku, which there wouldn't really be a sludge villain attack, and Baku would just basically try to bully Kugo, which Kugo wouldn't really let happen. So now Kugo, it's basically like the crack of dawn now. Kugo's within his subconscious, and he's basically throws a punch, which Deku, he's planning on finishing this off with a quick backhand, and then he thinks that you're not ready for it. As Kugo would dodge his backhand, and he would go up for an uppercut, which he would land, and Deku would basically be hitting the chin. So he's like, no! So Kugo, he would say, looks like you were actually ready for it then. As he would basically pull his sword out, or just appear, just make a zanpakuto appear. As he would basically say, unsheath it. As he would hold it out in front of Kugo. Which Kugo, he would grab the sword, and he would basically unsheath it. Then he would wake up. So, then Deku tells him, wait, one last time before he goes, when you need me the most, and when you need to access my power, call out my name. And then that's when, basically, Kugo wakes up. So, Kugo, he knows Deku's always told him to call him Mr. Deku. So, yeah. And as in Deku, he means as can do anything. So, yeah. Now, Kugo, he's walking to UA, as his sister's trying to convince him to turn back, that it isn't worth risking his life for. As Kugo's like, yeah, you can go bark it, sister. As he would walk into UA, Baku would try to basically scare Kugo off, as he's like, yeah, ignore it. So, pause. Now, Kugo is getting ready to take basically the written exam, which he aces because he's smart in this timeline. So, he's like, alright. As he's getting ready for the combat exam, which Kugo, he's been holding the sword, which, no! So, yeah, Kugo, he's been holding a sword, which it basically, the teachers are like, yeah, you can't use weapons in this. And Kugo's basically freaking out. He's like, Mr. Deku, I can't use the sword. And then Deku's like, that is quite an issue. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it, I got your back. Just call my name in battle. And a surprise will happen. As Kugo would be like, as he would throw the sword to the side. And now, Kugo, when the teacher says go, he would begin to run. Now, Kugo, he's been running around, and he hasn't really called Deku's name yet. As the zero planar thing would happen, Uraraka would be caught under the basically rubble. And Deku, he would basically, not Deku, but Kugo, he would be in shock. And he'd be like, Zan, he would put up his hand and he would scream, Zangetsu! As the sword that was laid on the side of basically the exam, it would basically fly through, it would land in Kugo's hand as Kugo would begin a transformation. Now, all of his clothes would change as it would turn into a black and white Shinigami clothes. A fur would be around Deku's neck, not Deku but Kugo's neck, and his hair would grow out into a blackish color. A mask would start to appear on his face. And now Kugo would basically completely disappear into consciousness. He would fall asleep because he's not mentally ready for this much of power. Now, Deku, he has surface. This is what Deku would look like. But he just has the face of Kugo and the hair. Long ass hair, basically. So he's basically looking at the 0 pointer as he would basically put his hand up. And actually, no, he would basically rush towards the Nomu, and the Nomu would throw its arm at Deku, and Deku would basically jump through the fingers. As once he leaped through the fingers, through the cracks of the fingers, all 5 of the robot's fingers would basically immediately fall off, because that's how fast Deku moved. He moved so fast that he cut the robot's fingers, and it didn't even look like he unsheathed his sword. So Deku's running up the arm of the Nomu, not Nomu, but of the 0 pointer, as he would appear towards the head. Deku would put his hand up and he would say, Sero, as in a gigantic blast would be released and the Nomu's head will basically be destroyed. Now, this was Deku using about 30% of his power, which means that he's much stronger. And because he didn't want to kill Kugo completely by flooding his consciousness with spiritual pressure so powerful that it would destroy his consciousness, he was like, yeah, I'm not going to go all out. So basically, Deku, he would basically land back on the floor. He would start walking on the air, which people are like, physics, what's going on? As Deku would walk down it looks like he's walking downstairs as he would land on the ground. Now, I'm gonna say that his sister was in the same area. So she was like, Kugo, what? And Deku would look over at her and he would say, huh? As he's thinking, should I say something? And he basically put on his Kugo impression. He's like, what do you want, sis? As she's starting to basically yell at him. She's like, what happened to your hair? As Deku is basically pretending to be Kugo as best as he can, because since he's watched over Kugo, I would say, ever since he was a baby. So yeah. And then basically Kugo would finally wake up and he's like, good kid, you take the wheel, as Deku would disappear into consciousness. Now, Kugo's hair would start to fall out as it would go to its how short it was, and how it originally looked, as the mask on his face would start to basically break into basically turn into dust, and the clothes that he had on, it would basically just start to fold into itself, creating the clothes that he had before. Kugo would be like, oh, sis, what's going on? And she's like, I was just talking to you. And Kugo's like, oh yeah, let's just go home and eat some grub. As he would basically start walking. Kugo does still have the zanpakuto in his hand. As the teacher, they're basically stuck. He has enough power, he destroyed the 0 pointer, he rescued the girl. But is it considered cheating that he used a sword? A weapon that probably wasn't even a part of his quirk, as they read his data. It says that he's quirkless, so that's even more confusing. So over the course of the week, they're deciding whether whether Kugo should be put into UA. Which Nezu would say, yeah, let's just let him in. And the teachers are like reluctant, and Nezu's like, fine. As he says, alright, my decision is final, as they put him into Class 1A. So Kugo, he would arrive a day after Class 1A, because it did take a while to get them his letter, because he really didn't, they were really confused whether to let him in or not. So the the test already happened where everyone showed their abilities already happened. Now, Kugo arrives. So, he's basically he arrives in Class 1A, as Kugo was feeling depressed for that day because he thought that he didn't make it in. So, he arrives to Class 1A as he's excited because he actually was accepted. He says, this is my journey on becoming the world's strongest hero. As he would walk in, Zangetsu in hand, or his zanpakuto in hand, and it would be Aizawa or All Might talking to them about the heroes versus villains. And he would be like, "Oh, young man, please take a seat," because All Might would be a learner. Basically, they would tell Aizawa and All Might that there would be another student added to the class. So Deku, he sits down as All Might starts to talk to them about the heroes versus villains. It took them a while to get, Deku wasn't there to put his hero costume registered in, so he has to wear, basically, Zangetsu, or Deku. He basically has to wear Deku's, basically, clothes. So when Kugo transforms, he basically more or less looks like this picture. So this is what his hero costume would be like, until he actually got his real hero costume. So, yeah. Now, people are like, this guy has a weird looking costume. I was like, did he just not show up for the first day? So they're like, this guy is probably, this is just weird. As Kugo, he basically is just talking with Deku in his head, as he would stop and he would draw his lot, and he would be put with Uraraka. And he would be going up against Todoroki and his sister, Izumi. And that is what I'll be ending off this video, because I don't really know how well I'm doing. So if you guys could show this video support, I'll put a part 2 in. And if you guys don't like it, then I'll just redo it. So, yeah, goodbye. Because I have 2 other videos to record after this.